Hello. Thank you very much for your invitation. I feel a bit exotic here because I will do a very, very, very low-tech presentation. I don't even have a PowerPoint, but I'm not an artist at all, and if I try to make a PowerPoint, I'm afraid it would be very ugly. I'm a lawyer, and I'm most interested in philosophy of norms, philosophy of law. And recently, well, it's not really recent. I have been busy with this since almost 10 years, but it's evolving all the time, so it feels new for me each time I reflect on this. I've been busy trying to develop a concept, or explore our contemporary digital society or reality or information society through the concept of algorithmic governmentality. In fact, by algorithmic governmentality, it's a strange word. It's not a theory yet. It takes really a long time to make a theory, I think. It's not a theory, but it's a mode of interrogating what happens in a world which is completely profligate with data and with quite strange data. Raw data. What is raw data? Raw data really is a new object in the semiotic universe. Raw data is not a sign. It doesn't mean anything by itself. It cannot be interpreted by humans. We need machines to interpret raw data. By itself, one raw data has no value at all. Except it gains value as a lot of other data is aggregated with raw data in order to make it to make a profile or a pattern from a network of raw data. So it's that strange object. It's that strange object first that puzzled me, because we celebrate the power and the innovation brought by big data, and I felt that there is some kind of ideology behind the whole idea of big data. So, in fact, by ideology, I don't mean the political ideology à la Althusser, because data don't unroll any subjects to an ideology. It rather ignores completely the very idea of object, subject, collectives, anything that has a form, a resilient form or shape. In fact, it's just exploding all kinds of images or forms or objects or subjects. So by the ideology of big data, I rather mean a technical ideology. By technical ideology, I use the notion defined by Pierre Macheret after Michel Pêcheur, and he says technical ideology relies on material procedures of production, collection, or what I call rawification. In fact, to render data raw, one needs very sophisticated processes of anonymization, de-indexation. In fact, you need really to make the data non-significant at all, meaningless, and you have to produce meaninglessness in order to have raw data. So it's a material procedure of production, of decontextualization, disindexation, anonymization, cleaning, but these material procedures of productions are then buried in the imperceptible background in order to propose instead a global interpretation of reality believed to stand on its own feet, as if it was the real, the non-constructed, the real, the nature, the real, itself that spoke in a dematerialized voice, being suspended the initial relation and dependencies with effective practices from which its expression arises. It's really a closure of the digital upon itself and a kind of, at the same time, an immunization from all kinds of test challenges which could arise from the represented reality, the world as it is. It's really closure of it's an immunization of all kinds of challenge that the reality, that the real, the physical, could impose on digital representation. But even representation is to say too much, because the ideology of big data is in fact a symptom of something really more general and which has nothing to do with technology. It's a general crisis of the very idea of representation. It's really the symptom of an excessive appetite or a passion for the real as such, immediate. It's the idea or the ideal or the utopia or dystopia of a direct, immediate access to reality as such, without representation. I don't mean that we want really realistic, more realistic representation. No, we want that there be no need anymore for representation at all. And that's the reason that's the reason why big data presents itself in the ideological discourses as really an exhaustion of all the reality. And it's really different from classical statistics. Classical statistics wanted to represent reality and try to be as objective as possible in the representation. But classical statistics did never mean to replace reality. But here, big data replace reality. And to the crisis of representation, it gives a radical answer. There is nothing left to represent. Everything is always already there. No need for artificiality of construction of images and so on. So in fact, what does big data do to our images? In fact, the universe of big data fits perfectly the description provided by Maurice Blanchot of a universe where image cease to be second to the model, where at last there is no more original, but an eternal glittering wherein the absence of origin gets scattered. So artificial, automatic is in fact the new natural. And each time you try to have some human interpretation, it becomes seen as unnatural, as biased, as not objective, you know? It's a complete inversion of naturality and artificiality, if you wish. In fact, what we are experiencing here is the rise of a new regime of visibility and regime of truth, wherein, in fact, truth doesn't matter anymore because you don't have original to which to compare the truth. There is no truth anymore, but there is a reliability without truth. You have also a regime, and I will explain that a bit later, of power without any kind of authority, with algorithm, you know, governing your potential actions, potential potential trajectories, and so on. And also a world of hyper-personalization without subjects. So we are really in quite a paradoxal situation, I think. So facing that ideology of big data, what's articulated to that? Apart from, indeed, the obsession with reality, with immediate access to reality, there are also political concerns, apart from epistemological concerns. Political concern is also that that passion for the real is also the passion for real cost, you know? Each person has to pay for his real cost. In fact, it has huge implications in a wide range of domains, such as insurance, for example. The role of insurance just disappears. As you can really, by algorithmic profiling, you can adjust the cost or the price each person has to pay for his own individual insurance. Then you just don't need categories anymore. And that's really a particularity of the governmental rationality accompanying big data. The hype for big data is the idea really of dealing with uncertainty in a radical new manner. You know, the wish for security is nothing new. Even Stefan Zweig wrote about that, about the golden age of security, where even the poorest people began paying in advance for their own burial and insuring themselves against everything. It's not nothing new. But as at that time, in the time of insurance, in the insurance or actuarial society, what happened was that people, in fact, dealt with uncertainty by collectivizing, by making collectives in order to be solidar among themselves and pay together for the accidents that arise to one of them. But this is the past. With the big data, what happens is that each one will have to pay for his own risk. Another way of dealing with uncertainty, or rather suspending the effects of uncertainty, and here you see that one of the virtues of uncertainty is that it obliges people to relate to each other, to make collectives, to become subjects. In fact, no? When you suppress uncertainty, I only can give some hints here about that, but when you suppress uncertainty, well, you gain efficiency, you gain operationality, you gain comfort, but you lose reasons for having a public space and for doing things in public. So, you see the target of algorithmic governmentality is also completely new. It's not the actual. It's not what bodies do, what people have done, but it's uncertainty as such. You know, it's not like in Foucauldian biopolitics. Biopolitics had as its target plague, foreigners, madness, you know, all these things that society, a good society should hide or put away, you know? These were the targets. No, it's not that at all. The target is uncertainty as such, which must be not eradicated, but suspended or neutralized. And how could we neutralize uncertainty? There are three ways through which algorithmic governmentality suppresses or neutralizes uncertainty. It's by struggling against the main sources of uncertainty. First one, subjectivity. If you replace subjects by automatic processes, then you have the impression that you gain some kind of certainty. I will not develop that here. Second, selectivity. We as humans, we always, because we have a body, we have a point of view on the world. And the point of view cannot be exhaustive. I see until there and there. If I were a child, I would see there. You know, we all have that. And that generates uncertainty. When you have a policeman in the street, he can only see that. He cannot see what happens in his back. Whereas big data is the view from nowhere that sees everything, you know? And that's the exhaustivity, the pretended exhaustivity of big data is also a reason why it appears so seductive for governments nowadays. Exhaustivity also by avoiding selectivity, and that's a reason that I will not develop here. I don't have time. But a reason why it's completely different from traditional statistical practices. When you had in statistical practices, you had to select data. You have to select data and ignore all the data which are too far removed from the average, for example, because they generate noise and are perturbative. Here, in big data, you need all the noise. You take all the noise into account, and that exhaustivity allows you, first of all, to appear more objective. You have taken everything into account, but also to make profiles which will count really even for what is most far removed from the average, for the very singular. And that, you know, you overcome the oxymoron of a personalization at an industrial stage. at an industrial level. So the objection to traditional statistics was always, you know, it's good for great numbers, but it's not good for me. It doesn't count for me because they haven't taken everything into account, or they have taken too many data or too few data. And for that reason, you could contest politically the results of debates based on classical statistics. In the ideology of big data, that's all finished. So it fits perfectly to each person. And massive personalization and massive profiling is so effective that in some time, maybe, as profiles proliferate, not willing to be profiled will be not willing to be oneself. Because in this situation, each individual becomes its own statistical norm in a way, or becomes a multiplicity, but a multiplicity without others, because profiles always come back to the individual. Another impact with political implications, another stake to consider, of course, is the fact that this system, as it is fantasized, I speak about ideology, this system doesn't know failure. Each time an individual escapes the profile or act, and it happens all the time. We never really follow the profiles which are attributed to us, but each time you escape, in fact, it's not considered by the machine as an error. It's just an opportunity to enrich the statistical base and to attune the profile to the wildest variety of what can happen in the world. So you see, it appears both completely objective and also completely neutral ideologically, politically. Because how are profiles built from big data? In fact, they emerge from the data. You know, usually when you try to categorize people or make groups of risk people or good workers or I don't know what, in fact, you have categories in your mind, and yet then you see people and you put them in the mental categories. But here it's the opposite that happens. In fact, you don't need, with big data, data mining, and the new machine learning systems, you don't need to have preconceived categories, preconceived hypotheses. In fact, the hypotheses and the categories flourish from the data itself. There is no selectivity from, it's really, you replace, in fact, and it has huge political implications, of course, and legal implications, of course. In fact, you replace hypotheses and causes, because the hypotheses we pre-construct have always a link with our idea of causality of events. You replace causal rationality by purely inductive statistical rationality. The consequence of that, when all you have in mind is preventing things, avoiding that thing happen or be sure that other things happen for sure. But when you don't want to understand the causes, or you can't, or you prevent yourself from understanding the causes of phenomena, you cannot prevent anything. You cannot do prevention. Because prevention means knowing the causes of phenomena and acting on the causes in order to correct the situation. In fact, you don't do prevention, but you do preemption. And preemption consists in exhausting the potential, the virtual. It means, well, that's a bit abstract, of course. It's a bit delusion, but it means that when you detect a potentiality for someone to be a terrorist, for example, you don't know that person, you know just that, well, there is a signature in the traces that person has left on the internet, or the contact he has, or the spams he had received in his mailbox, etc. There's a signature. Designing that person as a target for, intervention as potential terrorist. What do you do? Well, if you are the American army, you send a drone which sent a missile on that person you don't know. So it means you consider the person as having done what he was only capable to do. You know? And in Spinoza's term, the power or liberty of the subject consists precisely, or agency consists precisely in our capacity as human beings of not doing all we are capable to do. That kind of reticence, you know? And what is really endangered by algorithmic processes which act in advance in order to deal with us, killing us, for example, or deal with our environment to render some actions impossible or inevitable? What's at stake? It's not privacy. You know, lawyers think that privacy is all that matters in this world when you speak of digital data. It's not privacy at all. It's our capacity of agency. It's that possibility of that our capacity of reticence, of not doing all we are capable to do, that capacity make a difference in the way we are treated, in the way we are dealt with. The same happens in maybe less tragic situation. Why? It's not necessarily less tragic, but imagine a life insurer who goes online and see all people discussing on forum about domestic violence. They will consider the men and women discussing on that forum as well, already dead, you know, and the life insurer will not insure those people or require very, very high prices. You see, it has huge consequences. It's not only only fantasies, I mean. But all this, in fact, has to do with that. With that ideology of big data, which is really at the same time kind of totalitizing ideology, which does not leave itself disturbed by anything which is not digital. And at the same time, well, and it's the same thing, in fact, I realize now, but a complete neglect for physicality. Whatever happens in the physical universe doesn't matter anymore. It's sufficient to detect things happening in the digital world. So algorithmic governmentality has as subjects not bodies, not thinking bodies that we are. It not only has infra-individual data, meaningless data, and supra-individual aggregations of data. So the subject is nowhere to find. That's the reason why it's quite difficult to find ways of resistance. And also because the target is always in the future, what people could do, what could happen. A risk is no one. It's just a calculation. No one is directly bothered by a risk or not directly. So it's a mode of government which is really, at the same time, really spectral, and at the same time fueled by data data which are really amnesic, they're amnesic of their origin, of their meaning, of their importance. They are completely amnesic. And that's the reason, and maybe that's the last thing I will say, because I don't have much time. That's the reason why also big data, despite the aura of objectivity, raise a lot of issues in terms of discrimination, equality of opportunity and discrimination. When, for example, an employer relies on automatic recommendation systems for hiring the best employee, the employee who will resist the most longer to long working hours, etc. Well, he does that in order to be more objective. The employer doesn't want to be racist. He knows he could be a bit racist, and he doesn't trust himself, so he'd prefer trust the machine, who will give him an objective indication of the possibility that that person be a good employer, in order to be more objective. But in fact, and it's not the fault of the algorithm, it's the fault of the data. The unquestioned data. When you collect data in a city, for example, like Brussels, where maybe there are a lot of people who are racist, a lot of employers are racist, so the databases of where, for example, the time people have been employed, whether they were good, well-performing employees, etc., these databases just passively reflect the inequalities of opportunities, the stigmatizations which are suffered by some communities, etc. So it's not objective at all. But the effect of the dataification, that transcription of reality in a digital form, neutralizes and naturalizes, depoliticizes, and render invisible all these kinds of inequalities. So you see, it's there are huge issues. It's not issues of privacy only. So I had a lot of, I don't know if we have to. So if we have to, I thank you for your patience and hope to discuss about these preliminary, ideas. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Yes, thank you for your very rich and convincing analysis of this epistemology and the politics of big data. It's really, I think the best thing I've heard about big data so far. So the point where I disagree with you is, I mean, you say it's an ideology, but there is also the real world, and I think resistance is possible, and it's possible on the level of use of technologies and use of these profiles. So it might be that that there is the data about me, about my health, for example, but then I can still exercise agency in response to this. So there will be, of course, forces that try to quantify me. Quantify itself is something I didn't hear, but it's part of that discussion, I think. But I can respond to that in different ways. And so I agree with you that this ideology is very powerful and tries to do this to us. But I think we can resist.
Thank you so much. Thank you, because that word response is something really that I've been thinking about a lot. And especially the reason, for example, why I have been interested in modelization of human behaviors. That's my field of interest. It's not by anthropocentrism that I'm focused on that, or because I'm a lawyer, false one, no, but a defaulted one. But specifically because, as Derrida said, as Jacques Derrida said, the proper of humankind is that they respond to the name we give them. And they can, when you say, well, you are a woman. No, in fact, I'm not really a woman. Or you are a stupid. No, I'm not stupid. Whereas animals, when you tell them you are animal, they don't say anything. They don't say, no, I'm not an animal, But here, maybe we have a common cause with animals when we are confronted to profiling algorithm, because you cannot respond. You cannot respond, why? Because you never know how you are profiled, because a profile is a category which is not experienced. It's not superposed it does not correspond to any kind of category which is socially experienced. You cannot feel it, and it's evolving in real time. It follows you in each movement, and you don't know how you are categorized. And there is no way of knowing that, because, well, you know what you put, more or less, in the black box, the algorithm. You know what comes out, but you don't know how it works in between. And it's by purpose. It's by purpose. If it was not like that, it would be much less reliable. It's the argument by Google, speaking of PageRank, for example. He says, our algorithm must be opaque. People must not know what they should do in order to be best ranked than their neighbor, you know? In security algorithm, it's the same. You cannot tell terrorists how, you know, how they should behave, not to appear suspicious. So there is no way of responding directly to the algorithm. But your idea of response is very crucial, because I think the responsibility is not in the algorithm, it's our responsibility, it's our laziness, the fact that we want to gain time and effort by not interviewing people in order to know their motivations, to know what are their intentions, what are their wishes, what was their dream of last night, and what they want in the future. We don't want to interrogate people as autobiographical animals, which are able to give account of themselves. And I think giving account of oneself is really at the core of subjectivity. It's not our capacity of understanding and will, because machines in artificial intelligence will become much more human and much more subject than ourselves very soon. No, it's not that. It's our capacity after the fact to give account for things we did, or we thought, or we decided, even if we didn't have any mastery or control on the conditions which made us decide or do things in such or such way. You see? So that's my response to your response question. It's accountability, but of the person who takes the decision based on automatic recommendation, but also on the person who is the subject of that decision, the possibility to give account, even and tell bullshit or lie. It's something important, the possibility to lie.
Okay, thank you very much, Antoinette.
You're welcome.